All right, greetings, our absent members. This is Amber and our small class. We're missing 3 of you. So what we're going to do today is we are going to walk through all of the processes of phase 2 of the project approach. I know several of you have said that you have some questions or that you're concerned or confused. So we're going to make sure that we work through that and you guys have a very good sense of where you're going when you leave. All right, to start off, you're going to need materials. And basically, if you go into Blackboard, under assignments, you'll find a folder marked curriculum materials. In that folder, you're going to find that there are 2 sets, right, of curricular activities or lesson plans, 2 different kinds of lesson plans that you can do in phase 2. And we don't usually call them lesson plans in phase 2. Why? Why don't we call them lesson plans?
Because we actually doing experiences and exploring and analyzing.
All right. So the idea of a lesson plan paints a kind of picture for what a classroom experience might look like. So when you use that word lesson plan, what do you think that lesson plan means?
To follow a certain curriculum.
Right, to follow a certain curriculum. Is that curriculum pre-planned in a lesson plan?
Yes.
It is pre-planned. So with project, is it pre-planned?
No.
It is not pre-planned. It is what's the difference? What does an experience in a lesson plan in the project approach look like?
Children guided, where the children kind of dictate where you should go next, what they would like to learn.
Right. So the challenge here for us when we're kind of writing about this is we're trying to write something that's like a lesson plan, but it's not exactly a lesson plan because we don't totally know what's going to happen, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. The important thing, but there is a purpose behind having you write these things down, okay? Rather than just putting you in the classroom and saying, bring a bunch of materials with you, have a couple of questions ready for the kids, we want you to really pre-think what the learning should be like in phase 2. So think of your 6 different experiences or experiments as you're pre-thinking, okay, before you actually hit the classroom. Project approach takes a lot of thoughtfulness on our parts, a lot of thoughtfulness, and it takes the ability to think about how we work with children differently. Instead of us telling things, they are discovering new ideas and exploring. So we're going to go through this phase 2 curriculum materials again to make sure that you guys understand it. And Najwa is going to guide Rashida and Rochelle. Okay. Sharita and Rochelle. She's going to guide them in this process. And so if there is any confusion, I'm going to help you, straighten you out, okay? But we're going to start off by making sure that you have 2 sets of curriculum guides, all right? So again, you find it, go on Blackboard, click on assignments, click on curriculum materials, and then there'll be one folder for phase 1. We're past phase 1, right?
Yes.
And there'll be one folder for phase 2. Go into the phase 2 folder and you'll see Discovery Learning Experiences and Discovery Learning Experiments. And then for each, there's going to be a sample and a template and an explanation. So that's what you should have. You should have one for the experience and another one for the experiment. Okay, so do you guys have those in front of you?
Yes.
Okay. This is the one that is for the experiment. It's longer. Okay? It's longer for the experiment. Okay. Now, the way we're going to do this is, Najwa, I want everybody to flip over to the template. Najwa, you too. Flip over to the template.
On the experience or the experiment?
On the experiment. Flip over to the template. That's the experience. You want the one that's experiment. That's it.
It says experiment.
That's it. Oh, yeah, yeah. Let me see. Yeah.
This is experience.
Okay, yeah, you're right. That one, it's just in a different order from mine. Go over to, yep, you're right. Grab
This
that one.
one?
Yep. Go to the template. Do you have the template?
No, I don't.
Okay, use my template.
Here it is. I do have
Okay.
a template.
That's a sample. A template would have blank. See
The
how
blank
mine has
one?
blank?
Yeah, I probably didn't print it out, but I'll use
Okay,
it.
here, use mine.
Okay.
Here's my template. All right. So what I would like for you to do with the template is I would like for you do you have any experiments planned for your unit?
Yes.
Okay. What's your unit about?
Multiculturals.
Multiculturalism, okay. So you are going to actually talk us through, hello, welcome Constance, have a seat right there. You are going to talk us through, okay, what you want to have in front of you is from the experiment, the template, okay. You're gonna talk us through how you would do your experiment and write it out.
Okay.
All right? Okay, so let's start off with, is this a child interest or a teacher interest?
That would be a teacher interest.
Okay, so write that in the box, teacher interest. Okay. Najwa's talking us through her example. All right, what's the topic, Najwa, for yours? Multiculturalism, right?
Right.
Okay, so now let's come down to box 1 and box 2. Box 1 and 2, box 1, the next box underneath it has a 1 or a 2. Did you guys see that? Mm-hmm. And then below that there's a 1 or 2. Why? Why does it have a 1 or a 2 and a 1 and a 2?
Because first we're gonna ask a question. If it's something that's a child directed, the child will ask.
Okay,
right?
the questions first, yep.
And then and then we come back and then start researching.
Correct, right?
So in this one here, it's a teacher directed because I'm still talking about
Good.
the cultures.
Good.
And my experiment I'm going to use is the mixing oil and lemon juice because we're going to use that on a salad so that they're relating to it with
Okay.
what I'm using.
Okay.
So the question, this would be something that I'm going to initiate
Okay.
because
Okay.
it's something that I'm bringing to them, and then as they start wanting to explore
Right,
and learn,
right,
then
right.
we can add to it.
So what comes first, the question or the background research?
The question, because I'm going to introduce to them who can tell me what do you think would happen with the when we mix the oil and the lemon juice. Do you think
Is that your question or is that their question, Najwa?
that's going to be my question? I was thinking because I'm introducing it to them.
Right, right. Okay. So the reason actually, Najwa, that there's a box 1, you were very close, that there's a box 1 and a box 2, is because you can do these out of order. You can either do the background research first or you can do the question first.
Okay.
All right. In your particular case, you wanted it to be, usually if it's teacher directed, what comes first? Questions come first or research comes first?
Well, if it's teacher, then the research, because you've already gotten your
Right,
answers before
that's correct.
you come
So,
out and teach the kids.
Right. If it's teacher directed, usually you do what? You present what first?
The background research.
Right. Why? You have to give them what before you can ask them questions? You have to do what? Well, no, you have to give them
prior
experiences,
knowledge.
prior knowledge. They may not have
Right.
any prior knowledge of multiculturalism. Okay.
Like open the door for them.
Right. You have to bring them something. You have to bring them a picture, or bring them a book about it, or bring them some kind of materials. So have your children, when you do this lesson in your sequence of your project, have your children had experiences so far with multiculturalism?
Yes.
Okay, so they've already had some background research. So in this box right here under background research, I want you to write throughout the course of the project, the kids will have the following experiences. So now describe those for us. What kinds of experiences, Najwa, are you going to give the children?
I'm sorry, throughout the course of the project, what?
The children will have the following hands-on experiences.
Okay.
So what would be some of the experiences that you would be giving them?
Well, for the last 2 weeks, we've expanded the multicultural to last week. We did music, I brought some instruments.
So write that down.
Again.
Music. So they did music with instruments.
With instruments for them to, experience and try. I brought clothes. I brought like the little knickknacks, the brass stuff, and for them to see.
Games. Okay. So
And then we also had a potluck luncheon with the families Friday. I got pictures. It really turned out
that's
nice.
Awesome. Okay, and a potluck. Okay. So they've had lots of experiences, right, with multiculturalism. All right. Now, in this particular lesson, they're talking about how to make, is it how to make salad dressing? Are they experimenting with oil? What are they doing?
Well, what I was thinking, because from what I understand with the experiment, it's the same thing as when we do science experiences in the classroom before, when you're seeing the cause and effect. So what I was thinking, okay, since we've talked about this, I was going to do the experiment, and then maybe we could shake it up and then put it on our salad and eat that as a healthy, meal, and then they're able to try
So
the salad.
what question are the children answering?
How do they think? What do you think would happen when you mix the olive oil? And I didn't really research, but I do know that it separates.
Okay.
From the olive oil and the lemon juice. So, do you think it'll mix? Is it going to separate? Why do you think why do you think it didn't separate?
So now let's visualize this for a minute before we proceed any further, okay? Let's visualize. So Najwa's got the salad in front of her, right? Mm-hmm. She's got dressing. She's got oil and water. And
oil and lemon juice.
Oil and lemon juice and some vinegar.
We could, and we don't really use it much in the salad.
Oil and lemon juice. So you have those things in front of you, okay? So now when you do this experiment with children, okay, what question are they answering or what problem are they solving?
Well, I'm thinking, okay, I want to ask, like, okay, we're going to mix the olive oil and the lemon juice.
Okay.
What do you think will happen?
Okay, so what do you think will happen? What might some responses be from the children?
It'll be yucky. It'll be, I mean, kids are not really, especially at that age,
Okay.
Do you think it'll mix or separate?
That's what
like
I was
a
about to
sink or
say.
float kind of
They
thing?
separate.
Do you feel like there's enough in that experiment or that problem to support all the different steps that you have to do in this lesson?
I do if I investigate a little bit more.
Okay, if you investigated more, you could find, okay. And sometimes, one of the things about Project Approach I've noticed is sometimes you have to take your focus, your lens, and adjust it. So sometimes you have to get really, really close to a question or issue and make it more narrow, and sometimes you have to make it more broad. And one concern I would have with that experiment is that they don't have much opportunity for choice within the experiment. What choices do the kids have?
Well, once you put it together and then they visually see it, because I was going to put it in a bottle, I mean, it is really cool. You'll mix it and you'll see that the colors, you'll see the little, like, glowing of the olive oil with the lemon juice. It'll look, like, really kind of pretty, and then you set it down and then you'll start seeing how it'll settle.
Okay.
So you'll definitely see it.
What predictions could they make about that?
I don't know.
They could predict how much lemon juice or how fast they separate.
Measurements.
Oh.
Like
what about
they might ask, well, how much lemon juice we need? How much olive oil do we use?
Is it an exact, like you use 1/3 of this and 1/2 of that, or is it just?
It's not an exact. I mean, it's to your taste buds, but I would probably then measure and then be able to put it in there. Maybe if I did do more, that's a good idea, because that's what I'll probably try at home and see if I put a lot more olive oil and just a little bit of lemon juice, what would happen then.
Okay.
Now you're picking my brains.
Yeah,
right. That's what I call. I'm like, okay.
All right.
We'll say, well, how much we need? Ms. Najwa?
Right.
And what can they learn from that?
Oh,
That
definitely.
the reason why it probably, separated, because the oil is heavier than the lemon juice.
Okay, so you can teach them about the volume and mass?
Mass, okay.
Is that what you're thinking?
Probably.
Okay. When I look at the scientific method and I'm thinking about a problem that I want them to solve, my concern is that the lens has gotten really, really narrow with that particular experience. There's not a whole... They can either add more lemon juice or more olive oil, but those are the choices that I see. Do you see other choices inside of that?
No, but I mean, the reason why I thought that is cool, because I could also leave it as a sensory bottle, and it'll be an ongoing thing,
So does that seem like more of an experience or an experiment?
Be an experience.
Experiments are what we use to solve problems and answer questions.
Okay.
I don't know that there's a clear problem or a clear question with what you just described.
Okay.
I think it's a very cool experience. I think there's great smells. I think there's great visuals, like you're picking up on the sensory bottle, and the beautiful nature of the color, the golden droplets, of the crystallizing, and the taste. I think you're picking up on all the senses, but those are experiences more than they're an experiment. So we had a different idea before with bread. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I have it on here.
Okay, so and we talked about with bread doing an experiment with yeast. Do you remember that? So let's try and work through this and see how this could be a little bit different. Does anyone have any experience with yeast, working with yeast?
Yeast is rise. You have to let it sit, and after you mix it.
Okay,
rise.
why is yeast important for bread making? Does anyone know?
It gives it, it rises. It gives it, the
Right. And how do different cultures
It keeps
make,
the bread too longer.
right? How do different cultures make bread? What are the different kinds of breads?
Wheat bread, grain bread,
Pita,
There's
tortilla.
flat breads,
flat
right?
breads.
And fluffy breads, right? And American bread, does it tend to be more fluffy or flat?
Fluffy.
Okay.
We use fluffy. And what about baking soda and baking powder? What's the difference between those?
One for that's like
Not a
baking
baker.
soda.
You're not a baker.
Baking soda I use for the refrigerator to keep the refrigerator fresh.
Okay.
And
What does baking powder
for
do?
Cooking.
What does baking powder do?
It helps rise the bread too.
It does. It does. So the way that we get bread to be really, really fluffy is we use a combination of yeast and a combination of baking powder. We get that really big fluff. So now instead of having a piece of flat bread, we've got a very big, high, voluminous piece of fluffy bread, right? So I think if you think about yeast, okay, and yeast and bread and culture, to me, it seems like there could be a lot more options for what kinds of experiment. Like, let's just think about this for a second. What kind of experiment could we design with yeast? Let me just throw that out to you guys. What could you do with yeast and baking powder?
We could put it in the flour and mix it and then
Do you
let them
mix
see
both
how it
of those?
rises.
We could ask that. We could do an experiment.
Like,
I mean, couldn't we do a pretty easy experiment where we did had some wheat and some water, and then I've got a can of baking powder out and some yeast out. Now I could pretty easily design, right? What could I do?
oh,
What could I do? What do you think, Constance?
You said with the water and just...
Yeah, those are my ingredients. I've got yeast, baking powder, and flour and water. What could I do?
Mix them.
mix them separately
Right.
and see what happens.
So let's say I could have one container, and in one container, one plastic bowl, I just mix up what?
Flour and water with
Flour and water.
Right.
Right. And I bet you any money there's cultures where the bread, especially with a flatbread or a pita bread, is basically flour and water. I mix that up. Okay, I have another canister. What happens in the next canister? What do I mix in this one?
Yeast and water.
Yeast and water, okay? Or how about yeast, flour, or yeast, flour, and water? You could do just yeast and water. You could ask the kids, what do you think we should do? All right, and what do I do in another container?
The yeast, flour,
All the ingredients.
water,
And
and the
baking
baking soda.
Right. And see what happens to that.
Okay.
Now I cover them up. Or maybe I don't cover some. Cover some, uncover others, but I'm writing all this down. I have the kids write it all down in their journals. I make predictions about all of it. And then what happens? We leave, we go to something else, we come back in an hour, and what's happened?
Some of the bread rose, some of it didn't. So the kids gonna say, "Why that didn't rise? Ooh, why that's rise?"
Right.
Why that-
And then what, so now we've got to analyze, what kind of learning could we do from that? What could we ask, what could the kids learn from that? The effect of what?
Putting the yeast in with or without the yeast, making the bread.
Now, I could ask them this question. In some cultures, people make bread without yeast. Why?
Because they don't like they eat flatbreads or they don't
That's
believe
the way
in
they-
starches.
Not necessarily. I think it's just the type of bread that they have and the style of the foods that they have and
Okay.
how they eat it. Because I thought another experience would be just showing them the difference of how cultures eat with hands and
You
some
know,
eat
and
with
another thing when you
fork.
said that I thought of is, what do we put on our bread?
Butter.
And that's what I told you before.
Yeah, I
had
love
tried
that
an
idea. What do we
experience.
put on our bread? What
To
do
try like the hummus, try the
we put
cream cheese, the
or
jelly,
even
or
olive oil, right? Some cultures use olive oil and crushed garlic, right? Some cultures use butter, right? Some cultures do goat cheese.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that.
But mostly what we put on our bread is what's available to us.
right.
And the reason that we use different flours is because it's what's available
That's all
to
we
us.
have. Yeah, that's what
Right.
you said. Yeah.
So now let's try and work through this again. But this time let's try and use that idea of bread and let's see if it flows a little bit more easily, okay? So under questions to explore and investigate, what could we write? What could be some questions, you guys, to explore and investigate if we were doing yeast or bread?
What makes bread different?
Yep, what makes bread different is a good question. What else?
Why some bread rises.
Why does some bread rise?
Or some bread's flat.
And why are some breads good? Okay.
The colors in the bread. Some
Okay,
wheat,
good.
some,
Absolutely.
Some wheat, some
What do we
white.
put on bread?
What do we put on bread?
Right. Why is bread important? Right.
Well, the experiences are a little bit easier than the experiments.
They are. That's why we're starting there. Absolutely. The experiences, I think, are a lot easier to write than the experiments. All right, let's go on. So let's say you're going to do this activity, this experiment. What would you need to bring in? What would be a good way to introduce this to kids, this idea to kids?
I know I've tried this before by bringing like 4 different types of bread.
Perfect. Write that
That way
down.
it gives
So
them-
bring in different kinds of breads. Isn't that simple too to do? Well, a piece of pita bread, a piece of Wonder Bread.
I brought the French bread too because it's
Oh,
a
I
longer
love
one, and
that.
I
A piece
like
of
that.
French bread would be great. A crescent roll. Think about how different
Yeah.
all these things are, right? Pretty easy and cheap to have access to. So now, could we find children's books about bread?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, for sure, right? Okay. Could we just bring in pictures if we didn't want to go buy all the different kinds of breads? Could we
Yes.
just bring in pictures of bread, right? So it would be pretty. Could we bring in the ingredients?
Yes.
All right. So now, for our experiment, what other things will we need besides the ingredients? What would be good for kids to use? Because
The
remember,
utensils and
there you
the
go.
bowls
How about
and-
measuring? Because we want them to measure. Now think about if I bring in a tablespoon and a teaspoon and a measuring cup, think about how many variations we could do with that yeast experiment, right? Oh my gosh, the kids could design one experiment where they put in one teaspoon of yeast, 2 tablespoons of yeast, a 1/3 cup of yeast, and think about what they would discover, right? There's so many possibilities there. And can you see how, Najwa, with the olive oil and the lemon, do you see how that was more of a narrow focus? So there weren't as many different kinds of ideas to explore. So really, we were kind of limited in what we could do with that experiment to just alternating the amount of lemon and the amount of oil. And then maybe how much we mixed it. Those were really the 2 variations or variables. But now by pulling back that lens a little bit and focusing out, like you could pull the lens back on this idea of olive oil by doing salad dressing. Because salad dressing is it's a broader idea.
Right.
How to make your own salad dressing. What tastes good in salad dressing. You could
That's
do
true.
different kinds of oils, what different cultures use. I think Americans' obsession with ranch is very unique compared to other cultures. You could pull it back to how do we make cream.
That's a good idea. Then maybe I could try being that since I am doing multicultures, we're going to make ranch dressing. I'm sure I could get the recipe.
Absolutely. Well, one of the fun things you can do too with the cream is if you take heavy whipping cream.
Right, and then you shake it up
Yep,
and then you get
put
the butter.
right. Yep,
Yeah,
and it's
I've tried
very,
that
very,
before.
very cool. And kids end up put a brand new marble in there, and just all they have to do is shake it with that marble, and they will make butter, and they'll make that thick cream. So and then they could put that on bread, or that you could use that for a base for your ranch salad dressing. So you can absolutely do that, but just pull that lens back a little bit, so that there's more variables. Okay, so let's go on. All right, now let's say the kids have guessed. What were some of the questions that you guys wrote down for this?
For the bread,
Yeah, for bread. What are some of the questions you wrote down?
what makes bread different?
What makes bread different? Okay,
What
so now
did we put on the bread?
what do we put on bread? Okay, so now come down to construct a hypothesis. What makes bread different? You show the kids the ingredients. You explain to them what each of the ingredients are for. You show them the pictures of the pita bread. You show them pictures of the Wonder Bread. And then you say to them, guys, what do you think makes the bread different? Would they be able to come up with some answers? After seeing the ingredients, after seeing the different kinds of breads? They would have some pretty good guesses. Well, but they may not know what it is that makes the bread rise. They may think the flour is what makes the bread rise. Or they may think that the baking powder is what makes the bread rise. Have you guys ever tried a recipe once and it was fantastic, and you tried it the next time and it sucked? Has that ever happened to anybody? Why do you think that is? What
Making
happens?
cakes from scratches.
Okay, what happens?
Sometimes you don't have
Missing an ingredient.
Yes,
Ingredients.
I once made my world famous chili for my girlfriend who was sick, and I didn't have any chili seasoning, and I just didn't want to go to the store. So I said, you know what? I always use the same kind of chili. It's no big deal. I'm just going to use taco seasoning.
Yes, I've done it before.
That was awful. Awful. I knew she was very polite about it, but I knew she threw that whole pot. Hello. It's okay. Into garbage can because it was a terrible experiment, and I learned from that. You do not alter ingredients, right? In that way. So you're asking kids to think about that. I think cooking is a great way to really explore that idea of experiment, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so now let's go down to test our hypothesis. How could they test their hypothesis? What actual experiments could they design with the yeast?
What actual what?
Experiments could they design with the yeast? We talked about some of them. What could they do?
To see which one's
rises.
Right. They
Mixing
could,
it
right.
with the different.
So now let's go back to our 3 bowls, right? We give them the 3 bowls, we give them the flour, we give them the water, we give them yeast and baking powder. What would you need to do in order to really help them solidify in their mind the different steps of the experiment and what they were actually looking at? What would you need to do at that point?
Add the ingredients as you go along.
Okay, but also write it down. So just like when we're doing that experiment, everybody does it. Yes, right. We're doing an experiment with watering plants, right? We need to write down what we're doing. So I've got my 3 bowls, and I need to write down underneath this one what we added. We put in 1 scoop of flour, 1 scoop of water, and that's it. So I have a little sign right here, 1 scoop of flour, 1 scoop of water. Go to the middle bowl. I ask them, what do you guys want to do? What do you want to put in this one? We want 2 scoops of flour this time, and 2 scoops of yeast. So you need to write down 2 scoops of flour and 2 scoops of yeast. And if they say no water, fine. It's their experiment. They've designed it. Then you go to the next bowl. What do you guys think we need to add to this bowl to do an experiment about yeast? So you're letting them really lead and guide and design. So now, let's say that they decided not to add water to any of them. Would any of the bread rise?
No.
So you might make a suggestion. This is where, if you read it, it says, if you read the explanation for this one, it says the teacher guides them in this process. You're not directing the whole entire process, but you're guiding them and helping them. You're making a suggestion. You know what, guys? Why don't we try at least one with water so we can see if water has some kind of effect on this experience. Okay? All right, let's go down to analyze the data. So now you go outside. It's outdoor play. They're playing. They're having a good time. You bring them back in, right? And so now what do you do, Najwa?
We're going to check on the bowls to see what happened to the different mixes of the flour.
You pull off the cloth, and what do you say about that first one? What do you do?
Hey, boys and girls, look and see.
Right,
Let's see what
look
happens with this one here.
Right. Now, hopefully along the way, they've done, what kind of documentation would you have the kids do about this?
They're going to write it on their journal.
They would be writing it in their journal, right?
And the question would be,
right.
What happened with when we mixed yeast with just flour?
Yes.
Now they would already have that answer, right? What they think.
We would have
they would have made a prediction,
sheet of paper with the question on it,
and their predictions. Yep.
Like today, I tried one, and then I see where you're saying where I'm not bringing in the lens where we did go and try to go on the train that we were talking about. And then how fast was the bullet train going, which that I learned myself too as I'm going along the bullet train, because I didn't know about it since we're talking about China.
Right.
And they all drew the tracks, the train tracks. Somebody wrote like 3000. I mean, I saved them because I figured give them the sheets initially, and then I'll put it on the journals.
Good.
I'm really trying, Amber. I want you to know
that's good.
that.
No, I sense that. It's a different kind, and I think a lot of it is how closely you get that lens and how much you pull it back. The experiment is definitely more difficult than the experience.
And what I've learned too, though, it's you really, really need the support of the classroom as you're doing this, because I found out the kids know me and they're happy to see me in the classroom.
Right.
So they're all coming on you, and it's more of a smaller group project.
It's difficult to facilitate with the whole class.
And for me, for today, it was kind of hard because of, unfortunately, I had a large group and the fact that I was the acting lead.
Right.
So that was kind of hard for me to juggle. Although I had one of my floaters step in and I set up a few centers.
Good.
So that way I can try to control that computer and get on that YouTube, and we looked at the beautiful bullet trains. They're awesome.
How fast they go?
Well, it said 300 or more.
Miles an hour?
Miles an hour. And then there was something on there that said 1,000 kilometers.
Wow.
So I started to ask, and I'm thinking of you as I'm going along with this. Okay, if Amber was here, how
do we convert that?
Yeah, and I was like, and the inside was beautiful. It looked like an airplane. The kids enjoyed it, but I didn't feel like I did a great job as I wanted to, because again, here you're responsible for all the other, kids that's in here.
Right.
And then I didn't really have much research myself about it.
Right.
So I'm learning as I go along with
Right.
them. Then I'm starting to talk about whatever's on there. And then there was a couple of videos that we looked at and how fast it was going.
Wow.
And
Very
it was
cool.
nice though, but they took interest in it. And then I just labeled their name at the bottom.
Good.
And put it up to the side, and I figured I'll get to it tomorrow.
Absolutely.
So I am doing bits
Absolutely.
and pieces.
Yes. Yes.
But I'm still kind of all over the place with it.
Okay.
That's
All
why
right. So big part of this description is then helping you focus that lens, giving the kids enough variety within an experiment so they can design different elements of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you should maybe try the bread and yeast because that's just such a natural one
Oh,
and
yeah,
it's so
yeah.
easy. All right. Let's move on. Constance, what's one of your experiment ideas? Let's look at that template again in light of constances. Let's work our whole way through it.
Okay. One of my experiments, you said?
One of your experiments.
Okay, I had I was gonna have the kids use the nails and the hammer to put together these wooden blocks that I had got from Home Depot, and I said I would have a display of different tools and items on the table, and asked the children a question about which tool would they think would work best. Like we talked about last week, you said it would be more of an experiment for them.
Okay. Which tool will work best to put together?
To hold together the wood.
To hold together the wood. Okay. And what kind of tools are you going to put on the table?
I had hammers, of course, glue, Scotch tape, tape measure, and then we said Band-Aids.
Okay. I love it.
So they get to experiment.
Okay, so now we're gonna go. Very good. Okay, so what kind of background research besides the materials could they do about how to put things together? What could you show them, or what could you ask them about? What do we know about how to construct things, or
Directions, instructions, visual
All right.
pictures.
Okay. All right. What about building? What prior experiences would kids have had with building, with making buildings or putting things together?
Wood.
But you can
Different
take
shelves
screws,
and stuff like that.
screws,
Like that
I
they
get the
use.
screws in
What
the
do kids
house.
put together?
Blocks.
Blocks.
So, okay. What about?
Castles and houses. They
Yeah.
need to know the different types of shapes. What
What do kids use a screwdriver for? Do you think?
The workbenches that they, they'll have those, the screws.
We have a couple screwdrivers in my kids' playroom, and there's one thing that they consistently use the screwdrivers for.
For the back of the toys.
Yeah, right. To do what?
To take away the battery.
There you go. To
batteries
switch
out.
out the batteries, right?
Right.
So I think, right, one thing you might say to them is, how do we put something together? I might even bring a simple toy with a battery and say, how does this connected? Right? Can you see how that would be an experience? And then you could just put it out and say, how does this plastic plate, maybe have it unscrewed, how does this plastic plate fit onto the back? And then the child will come over and they would say, well, you got to screw it in. And you could show how that screwdriver connects them. Okay? So again, they can discover that. All right, so now, what do you think, what are some experiments that Constance's class, let's pretend we're little, and Constance is our teacher, and she's got Scotch tape, I love it, Band-Aids, right? A couple pieces of wood, some hammers, screwdrivers. What would be some experiments that we would design on how to get those two pieces of wood to stick together? What would we do?
Ask for glue or tape. We use the tape.
Okay. So now let's visualize that we're doing it at this table. Okay. Concept would need probably more than, they could do it a couple ways. I mean, you could use the same two sticks of wood, right? And ask the kids to put them together. Couldn't you? Okay, so how would they do that? What do you think they might do? How would they try to
They
put
would
the?
probably
Start playing with it. Take an experiment. Yeah.
If you give them like masking tape and maybe start like putting it together. That.
Okay, right. So I might say to the first group, okay, you guys, she's got a couple options here. She could ask the class, do you guys each want to try and get the different materials? I'll give you each 2 sticks and I'll give you a material and you can see if you can get it together. Or do you think we should do this as a big group? Can you see how there's options there? Because you even want them to design the experiment. You even want them to design how you're going to test the hypothesis. Not, here's 2, remember our one teacher that we watched when she was doing heat transfer? Here's 1 cup for you, here's 1 cup for you, here's 1 cup for you, here's 1 ice cube. Don't touch your other person's cup. Don't touch it, don't touch it, don't touch it. All right, now let's switch cups, switch cups, switch cups. Put your finger in the other person's cup. Did you remember how teacher directed that was?
Right.
That the children didn't have any options. They couldn't even put an extra ice cube in their cup without the teacher allowing them to. So Constance, for you, it's having like those two pieces of wood and then saying, okay guys, how are we going to figure this out? And giving them options. You guys can do it as a whole group, or you put the two pieces of wood together, one group tries to tape it on, and then you look at it. The other thing is documentation. How are you going to do the documentation? What are you going to have them do?
Write in their journals. Write in their journals at first.
Make a prediction.
What works best to keep the wood together.
Okay, good,
And then
good.
write out their answer, what
Okay.
they think would work best.
Okay.
And then we can all experiment.
I would probably have them draw a picture, because rather than writing their answer down, I think if they drew a picture of
Right,
how their
that's
wood,
what I meant, draw a
how the
picture.
wood gets together, absolutely great. I love it. And then, are they going to be able to figure it out? How are you going to do that analysis? That could be really fun. After they've tried to put the two pieces together with Band-Aids, what are you going to do?
Show them, hold it up to show them
Uh-huh.
whether or not it's still it
Yeah,
stays.
I'm going to tell you the only thing I would think is, rather than just have them take two random pieces of wood and kind of put them together, I would give them a purpose.
Right, and that's what I was struggling with.
Okay, what
Because
purpose could, all right, imagine, can you describe the wood pieces for me?
They're like the little, it's actual, they're not
The
like
molding?
really hard wood. It's
Okay.
like, kind of like
How thick are the pieces?
about that thick,
How long?
about that long.
Do you have a whole bunch of them?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
What could you measure with that?
measuring tape.
You could use a measuring tape to measure it, but what if you put them all together? What could you measure it?
Table, measure the table. Or even have
How
them-
many sticks it take to measure a shoe?
Or how many, if they lay
sticks it
down on
takes
the
to measure?
floor, how many sticks tall are you or your friend?
But Joshua just had this.
Yeah,
how
we did
many?
it. How many foot tall are
it
you?
takes how many sticks it'll take to measure this, or a shoe, or one of them little combs.
Or your body. Kids like that. They get to lay down on the
Or
floor.
maybe a new pointer for the classroom for when you guys are looking at letters or looking at different things. We need to make something. I just think if you can give them some purpose for putting the sticks together, it's going to have more meaning. I think if you could say, I want a measuring stick. I want to put a couple of these sticks together so I can measure your feet.
Okay.
Or so I can use it as a pointer, or so we can put it in dramatic play, and it can be a pretend hammer. But give them some reason, some real reason. Remember, because the best experiments are how to solve problems.
Okay.
Okay,
So
some
purpose of why they are
Putting the
those
sticks together.
sticks
Yeah,
together.
we're going to make something today. I want to make a blank. And then asking them how can we make this? Very good. Okay, we're moving on. All right, Sharita, you're going to do apples.
Are you still recording?
Yes, I am. You're going to do...
Yeah,
oh,
turn
yeah.
to your rest of your class.
No, thank
Yeah.
you.
All right, you're going to do apples, right? Okay, so tell me a little bit about why you went the direction of apples.
Because I did the cooking with them today, and they seemed to take more to the apples.
Okay, they really...
When we got to apples, I presented 2 pictures. One of a rotten apple
Okay.
and one of a ripe apple. That's what you call it. And I said, which one would you like to eat? And, of course, they all went, oh, I don't want that apple. And I said, why? And we discussed why, what happened to this apple and what they think happened. And why this is a healthy apple and why is this the one they prefer to eat.
Ooh, I think I can think of a great experiment. Okay, so let's think about rotting apples. What experiment could we do with apples that rot and apples that don't rot?
Let the kids cut them up.
Yeah, and do what?
Look
And
at
leave
them,
leave
dissect
them
them.
out.
Because my son be like, it's brown on there.
Okay, brownie.
And I
Okay.
say, I cut it off, Joshua.
All right, what do they include now in every single McDonald's Happy Meal?
Apples.
Apples.
Apples. Now, are those brown?
No.
Preservative.
Oh, there's some, right? So this would be very cheap. You go to McDonald's, you get a package of their apples, right? You put their apples out. Now you go and you get an apple from the grocery store and you put that apple out, right? What happens to the apple that you cut it from the grocery store?
It's going to turn brown. So
It's going to turn
airhead.
super brown, right? But what about the McDonald's apples?
It's going to stay the same.
Probably stay the same because they don't got the
They will
preservatives.
stay the same because they have the preservatives on them. So then you can ask them,
Why do
why?
you think this apple didn't turn brown like that apple?
Right, and so they can make predictions. You guys could go on the internet You could ask them, can you think of anything that would help preserve these apples?
Somebody painted it.
Right. And so what you would find is, and what you could maybe know in advance, is you could say, you know what, something that has acid in it, a natural acid will preserve the apples. Right. So I would have a couple of different fruits. Like I would have an orange.
Lemon can preserve the.
An orange.
An orange too.
And a lemon. And lemon. Right. What is another thing? How about a lime? But I would give them a couple choices, because remember with experiments we need choices. We need to be able to test, right? So I would say, okay, here's 3 different kinds of fruits with acids. We're going to see which fruit do you think will preserve it the best.
And you can soak them in water too, so that they don't turn brown.
And you can try water too. I do that when I make an apple pie. I put them
Or
in.
like if you have like a big tray that you want to do for a fruit tray.
So now I've got my orange, my lime, my apple, all those
And then
things
the
out.
different tastes, and then some
Right.
of it would be sour,
Right.
sweet,
Right.
and a little bitter with the lime.
And then we're going to do this experiment to see which thing do you think will preserve the apples. And then we could ask the question, like, did you ever look at the McDonald's package of apples?
No. Yeah, I have.
Does it say just apples? Are there other things in it?
I didn't look at the
I didn't ever look at the ingredients.
There's other ingredients in it because the preservative is in it. So then just by looking at the
I
packaging,
just
you'll-
know that the ones I bought from Costco, I wasn't too pleased. I could actually taste that it wasn't.
Yeah, I bought some fruit from Kroger's. That's right. We bought a big bowl of fruit, and all of us, it had this sizzle taste, and I was like, ugh.
a
And
preservative that they put on it
yeah.
to keep that fruit from turning brown. Because natural
You
cut
can
fruit
try
is going
that
to turn.
too, because that fruit was compared to the other little bowl of fruit that I normally
Sometimes it
get.
may be old, because sometimes it does
taste,
that
they can
too.
taste
You can
the
taste the
difference.
preservative, yeah. They could taste the difference between the Kroger apple and the regular apple, but there's just a ton of things that you could do with that experiment.
So what do you do with the rotten apple? It sounded like you knew that there was something that, I mean, other than animals or a squirrel or somebody trying to get to it, what would you do with a rotten apple?
What do you think?
What do we do with the rotten apple?
Uh-huh.
Well, I thought just taking a regular apple and watching it turn rotten, I thought that would be a good experiment. Then cutting it up. But,
What would you need to keep track of in a science experiment with an apple that was rotting?
data, they would have to.
What kind of
record
data?
Pictures.
Time. Yeah, time would be really important, right?
Yeah.
How long does it take?
Temperature or light or no?
Temperature, absolutely. Light. Yep. Different kinds of apples also turn differently.
Oh, really?
Like the Granny Smith apples don't turn brown quite as fast, but those Red Delicious apples, like you cut them and 5 minutes later they're
They-
completely
yeah.
brown. So they
That's
turn.
Another thing that you can do.
Granny Smith, that's a brand.
That's the
It's a green.
green
ones.
apple.
Yeah, the green ones don't turn
And
it so
then
bad.
Why? Why do they do that?
Good question. Why? I think it's because the Granny Smiths have more acid.
Okay.
And the acid is a natural preservative that keeps them from turning brown. But think about, I don't know, completely.
Right.
I mean, there's tons of research that you could do about that.
Yeah.
And I mean, you've got other directions too. You can go into the whole preservative things. What preservatives do we put on fruit? How do we preserve fresh fruit? What about the refrigerator? There's another element, right? What if I put it in the freezer?
Yeah, that's what little boy said up here.
Yeah, when you put it, or if you leave it outside in the cold now,
Right, in the cold
car,
now,
they
yeah.
be froze.
That's
They be-
good. You could put
they
one
be
bowl of
mushy.
apples outside or one couple apple slices outside. Might get eaten by an animal, but that's kind of cool too. A couple apple slices in the refrigerator. Then put a couple by the heater. We got a heater blowing in here. What happens when you add heat? So you've got so many elements there. You've got heat, you've got time, you've got other preservatives that you can put on it. So you just have, do you see how by pulling that lens back? Just
Well, I'm
that-
glad you changed it, because apples are, it's a nice experience.
Very, very cool. And there's a lot to do. We just talked about the experiment, but we'll talk in a little bit about some other things that you can do with apples. Okay? What about you, Rochelle?
I'm still with the wind.
Okay, all right. And what's the experiment that you've been thinking about doing?
I did, we talked about the different pressure for the air. So at first we did like the wind, we was asking him, can he feel the wind? Then we felt to see if the wind was in the house, air in the house. I told him stand by the door. I told him go outside. He noticed the air started blowing. I used the fan for different, to show him, you know, if you turn it up low, if you turn it high, the things that could blow the balloons. And
Okay.
we did the heater, the different, and then we went outside, and I said, look around and see what blows. How you know, you can tell the air is blowing. and he started pointing at things. We went on the internet, listened to the different kind of wind, the air for snowing.
Okay.
I let him listen to different kinds.
So what is Rochelle describing to us? Experiences or experiments?
That's what
You're describing experiences.
Okay, so these are called experiences.
You're describing experiences,
Even
yes.
with the different heat, like the cold air.
All right, well, let's go. Let's
Okay.
look now at the template.
Okay.
Again, look back at the template, and
Okay.
let's see how she could change this into an experiment, okay? Because we've got really concrete ideas about bread and yeast. We've got very concrete ideas about tools, right? Concrete ideas about apples. So now let's get a real concrete about an experiment with the wind, all right?
You can do like different objects.
Well, let's come up with a question first.
Okay.
All right, what would be our question, you guys? What would be a nice, broad enough question? We've got a lot of variables in it. What would be our question with wind?
What would be a question with?
What
Let's
make the
brainstorm for a
wind
second.
blow?
What makes the wind blow?
Or how does the wind blow? Or
I'm trying to
when-
think of something we can design an experiment around. How
Why
does?
is the wind important?
Why is the wind important? Okay. Now you can maybe go with the direction of plants, or you can go. Why is the wind important? It's a hard one to answer. Can anyone answer that? For weather, currents.
Because you need a variation of temperature
Do
for
you?
different, elements like humans, plants, animals. Everybody has just a different climate.
I can do an experiment with the you know how the thing that blow what is called a
Turbine.
yeah, and then the kids will
Oh,
actually
the electricity.
the kids can actually take things and make the wind thing that
Turbine.
show which way the wind blowing.
Oh,
What makes the weather windy?
it's
Maybe
compass, not a compass. The fourth.
This right here, the windmill.
the windmill. Yeah.
It's
You
not
can
a
do it.
windmill. It's a weather vane.
I guess
Oh,
it's
I know what you're talking about.
It's
The
a
one that
weather
says the
vane.
northeast. No, my
Yeah.
son told me what it was. I was
It's
like,
a weather vane. it tells what direction the wind is blowing.
no,
North,
it has
south.
a different name.
Windmill. It's right here.
No, the one that's north, south, east.
This,
With the rooster.
yeah.
That's. Oh wait, maybe that one is a windmill.
This
That one
is the windmill.
I thought you
The
were
one
thinking
that
the
you're
one on
talking
top.
about.
On top of the house where it showed the rooster and it shows the direction the wind is
Yeah.
pointing in.
It has a different name. I forgot what it's called.
Isn't that a weather vane?
I know currents is the different kind of winds because I used to ask Josh, well, what type of wind is that? And he'll say number two.
compass.
You know, the harder pressure of the wind, you can blow the houses off.
Okay.
I was everywhere. I was thinking about all kind of stuff, but I really need to find out which, like you say, the experience or the experiment.
Well, I think part of your but part of what would be difficult about doing this as a project with just wind is getting a broad enough focus that you've got enough different kinds of things to do. Because it sounds like you've done a lot already.
I did bubbles, like we was in a laundromat. We went on a